The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of my apartment, illuminating the meticulous life I had built over the past decade. Today was my 29th birthday. I should have felt excitement, but there was an edge in my chest, a mixture of anticipation and dread I couldn't quite place. After 10 years of scrimping, sacrificing, and dreaming, I had finally accumulated $2,900,000 in savings. Every late night, every unpaid bill, every penny I had denied myself, it had all led to this moment, a symbol of my independence and the future I had fought so hard to secure. I didn't expect my parents to remember, or care. They rarely did. So when my phone buzzed with a call from them, I smiled politely, my intuition whispering that this would be interesting. "I'm here," I said brightly when they arrived. Their expressions were smug, satisfied, and chillingly triumphant. I froze, sensing the storm before it hit. My father's eyes glinted with a cold amusement, while my mother's smile was sharp, almost cruel. "Happy birthday," my father said, his voice dripping with mock warmth. Then, without hesitation, he added, "Thanks. Your money secured your sister's future." I blinked. My heart stalled. My mouth felt dry. My $2,900,000, the life I had meticulously built, was gone. Stolen. Taken without warning or permission. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Excuse me?" My mother's lips curled, dismissive. "You would have wasted it anyway. Better she has it. Smart, practical. Unlike you." I laughed. Out loud. A single, controlled laugh that sounded like madness to anyone who didn't know me. It was a laugh born of shock, yes, but also something else, a quiet, simmering recognition. I knew, at that moment, that I had been expected to break, to collapse, to plead and beg for mercy. But I didn't. They waited for the despair that never came. And in that waiting, they underestimated me. Because what they had taken, they thought it was the sum of my dreams, my hard work, my freedom. But it wasn't. It couldn't have been. Not really. Not the way I had planned. My mind, which had always been underestimated, was quietly mapping, calculating, and preparing for a future that only I controlled. I smiled again, this time slower, colder, sharper. "You took what you thought was mine," I said softly, almost tenderly, letting the weight of my words settle like dust in the room. "And you laughed thinking it was clever." They looked at me, puzzled now. My father's smug grin faltered, and my mother's sharp smile wavered. The room, filled with their condescension moments ago, suddenly felt smaller, tighter, charged with something unspoken. Because what they didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that I had been 10 steps ahead. Every transaction, every account, every move they thought they controlled had already been anticipated. The trap was set. And now, unknowingly, they had walked straight into it. I raised my glass to them, to their arrogance, to the illusion of their victory. "Thank you," I said. My voice was calm, measured, almost gentle. "You've made this so much easier than I thought." And for the first time that day, I felt a thrill surge through me. Not the thrill of money, but the thrill of knowing the hunt had begun. Because betrayal is a gift, if you know how to use it. After the initial shock of my birthday betrayal, I retreated to the quiet of my apartment. Alone, I let the silence stretch, letting my emotions settle, not because I had forgiven them, but because I needed clarity. Betrayal had a way of clouding judgment, and I had spent 10 years sharpening my mind, not letting it dull now. As I sat in the soft glow of the afternoon sun, my mind drifted back to the past decade. Every late night spent at a second job, every penny set aside in secret accounts, every cautious investment, it had all been more than just saving money. It had been preparing for the moment when I would no longer need to be naive or trusting. I had always known my parents' tendencies. Their favoritism, their arrogance, their belief that the world revolved around them, it wasn't a surprise to me. And while I loved them once, I had long learned that love could exist alongside vigilance. It had started subtly, almost imperceptibly, during my early 20s. While I appeared compliant and dutiful, I had been quietly collecting evidence, emails, legal papers, account records, all carefully duplicated and hidden. I had known that someday, if the worst came, I would need leverage. What I had not expected was how blatantly they would betray me. But, as always, I was ready. The betrayal had hurt, yes, like a blade twisting in my chest, but it also ignited a cold clarity. Pain is sharp, but clarity is sharper. I began planning my response, not impulsively, not out of anger, but strategically, methodically. Every move they had made, every smug laugh, every dismissive comment, became a piece in a puzzle I had long been assembling. I allowed myself a small, dark smile. My parents thought they had stripped me of my years of effort, but what they didn't realize was that the money they took had been carefully manipulated, transferred, and protected. I had used fake accounts, dummy investments, and layered legal structures. To them, it was theirs. To me, it was a controlled illusion, a trap waiting for its spring. Yet the most important part of my preparation wasn't money. It was understanding them. Every condescending remark my mother had ever made, every arrogant decision my father had taken, they had revealed their patterns. I knew where their egos would lead them, how their greed would blind them, and how their arrogance would become their undoing. As evening fell, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. I was hurt, yes, but I was not powerless. In fact, I had never been more alive. The fire inside me was no longer just ambition, it was purpose. And the greatest satisfaction wouldn't come from reclaiming what was mine, it would come from seeing them crumble under the weight of their own choices, all orchestrated by my hands. I stood and looked at the city lights through my window, the hum of life below masking the storm I was quietly brewing. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. And I would deliver it with the precision of someone who had spent a decade preparing. For the first time since they took the money, I felt free. The trap was set. And soon, very soon, it would spring. The days after my birthday felt almost surreal. My parents continued with their lives, blissfully unaware that the very foundations they believed they controlled were already shifting beneath them. I watched from the shadows, not with fear, but with anticipation. Every phone call, every boastful remark, every haughty glance, they were all pieces moving themselves into the positions I had meticulously prepared. I began my moves quietly. Nothing flashy, nothing obvious. I had learned long ago that revenge is most effective when it is invisible, when it creeps up slowly until its power is undeniable. My first step was subtle. I allowed small mistakes to slip into the accounts they now believed were theirs. A misfiled document here, an overlooked clause there. Each tiny error seemed accidental, but in reality, they were threads that, when pulled, would unravel the entire tapestry of their arrogance. I reveled in watching them operate. My father, ever so confident in his intellect, began to make decisions based on incomplete information. My mother, intoxicated by the illusion of control, flaunted the money as though it were her own triumph. Neither of them suspected that each action brought them closer to the edge of a trap they could not see. Psychologically, I played them like a master chess player. I sent subtle hints through conversations, casual remarks about investments, innocuous questions about legal paperwork, all designed to guide them toward my intended outcome. Their greed and pride were predictable, as dependable as the sunrise. The more they moved, the tighter the snare became. But it wasn't just strategy, it was art. I savored every second, every flicker of overconfidence in their eyes, every smile that revealed their underestimation of me. The betrayal still stung, yes, but now it was a sharpened weapon in my hands. Anger had transformed into clarity, and clarity into precision. One evening, as my parents argued over a supposed mistake in one of the accounts, I sat across from them, calm and collected, my lips barely twitching in a smile. "Are you sure you're looking at it correctly?" I asked softly, almost innocently. My mother shot me a sharp glance, exasperated. "Of course we are," she said, but I could see the doubt flicker, the uncertainty creeping in. That tiny hesitation was all I needed. It was the first crack in their armor, the whisper of vulnerability I had been waiting for. Each day, I nudged, I teased, I orchestrated. I didn't need to raise my voice or threaten them. My revenge was quieter, more elegant. It was the kind that eats from the inside, and by the time they realized it, the damage would be complete. The thrill of control coursed through me. I wasn't just reclaiming what was mine, I was showing them the consequences of underestimating me, the price of arrogance, the weight of betrayal. They had thought my compliance and silence were weakness. They had thought they could manipulate me, use me, discard me. They were wrong. And now, the pieces were in place. The trap had been set for years without them knowing. The spring was cocked, the snare invisible. And soon, very soon, they would fall, not with a scream, not with a fight, but with the devastating realization that the very world they had tried to control was now entirely in my hands. I leaned back in my chair, a faint smile curving on my lips. Patience had always been my ally. And the moment of reckoning, sweet, inevitable, irreversible, was nearly here. The final act began on a quiet morning, the kind that felt too calm, too still, like the world itself was holding its breath. My parents had summoned me to their home, frustration simmering beneath their carefully constructed expressions. Documents were scattered across their dining table, numbers circled angrily, pages highlighted in neon desperation. "Explain this," my father demanded, jabbing a thick finger at one of the papers. His voice, usually booming, trembled ever so slightly. It was the first time I had ever heard uncertainty in it. I glanced down, barely hiding my satisfaction. It was one of the dummy contracts I had planted early on, worded legally, framed logically, but leading nowhere. A dead end. A financial labyrinth. A legal sinkhole. What exactly am I explaining? I asked softly, pulling out the chair opposite them. My mother's eyes were bloodshot, panic swirling behind her usual arrogance. "This," she snapped. "These accounts, they're wrong. Nothing matches. Nothing transfers. We can't access." "The money?" I supplied gently. Silence crashed over the room. I folded my hands on the table and met their anxious, desperate faces. They had finally reached the moment I had been building toward for 10 long years. The invisible rope around their necks had tightened, thread by thread, and now they were choking on their own greed. "You took what didn't belong to you," I said calmly. "What you believed was mine. What you believed you had a right to." My father's face reddened. "We did it for your sister. And you expected me to suffer for it." My voice didn't tremble. "You expected me to fall apart. To beg. To break. But instead, I leaned in, lowering my voice to a whisper. I planned." My mother frowned, confusion and dread nodding in her expression. "What do you mean?" I slid a folder across the table. Neatly organized. Color-coded. Ironclad. Inside were the real documents, the proof of my long-laid trap. Hidden accounts. Protective legal measures. Dummy investments. All the pieces they had overlooked in their arrogance. "The money you stole," I explained, "never truly belonged to you. The accounts you emptied were legally protected decoys, set up years ago. Not a single dollar you took was part of my true savings." They stared, frozen. Pale. "And what you did take," I continued, "is now tied to financial liabilities. Fraud investigations. Audits. All triggered automatically the moment you attempted unauthorized access." My father sank back in his chair, the reality hitting him like a weight he couldn't bear. My mother's hand shook visibly. Why would you do this?" she whispered. I smiled, not cruelly, but with a calm they couldn't comprehend. "Because you taught me something important. You taught me that family doesn't always protect you. Sometimes, they're the ones you need protection from." The room felt colder now. Quieter. I stood, gathering my coat. "You wanted to secure my sister's future," I said softly. "Well, now she'll have to learn the way I did, through consequences." As I walked toward the door, neither of them spoke. They were trapped in the cage they built themselves, a cage I had simply furnished with truth and law. Outside, the air felt fresher, lighter. My steps were steady. For the first time in my life, I felt free, not because I won, but because I chose myself. Sweet justice wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was quiet, precise, and final. And it tasted like peace.